You may have heard that there have been some pretty crazy things going on in Bolivia, and you'd be right. President Evo Morales has been forced to step down by the Bolivian military. You may know he was a socialist president with a lot of lithium resources in this country that the U.S. vitally wanted. So these are all, by the way, things that you should be keeping in the back of your mind. But his opponents alleged fraud in a recent election that he won, but he still agreed to hold a revote anyway. And that begs the question, why would he step down, which he did on Sunday afternoon? That's the curious thing. Like they had already gotten, the opposition had already gotten what they wanted from him, which is a agreement of a revote. So why would he step down? Well, here's the thing. What's really going on is this is a coup backed by the United States and executed by right-wing terror groups. They've attacked the houses of both Morales, his political associates, and his family members, including his sister, leading the Morales family and his associates to flee and hide for their safety, even leaving the country. And recently, a small-town mayor was beaten up, her hair forcibly cut, she was kicked, punched in the streets for her alignment with the Socialist Party in Bolivia. Today on Red Alert, we will explain what this all means, what's going on, why it's happening. We'll give you the full rundown on everything to do with Evo Morales and his rise and fall in Bolivia. So stay right here with us. Thank you so much for tuning in. This is Red Alert. The long and the short of it essentially goes like this. The OAS, which stands for the Organization of American States, which, no surprise, is controlled in a big part by America, teamed up with the media there, an emboldened opposition, which is clearly not the most popular party in the country, and the Trump administration, which ousted a successful leftist leader. We'll take a look at how they did it here. Evo Morales was the country's first indigenous president in its entire history. All the rest had been descended from colonial Spaniards, and oversaw a drastic economic transformation that cut poverty in half. It was really good, and one of the exhibits of successful socialism. As Anthony Fiola writes in the Washington Post about a month before this all went down, people in Bolivia, the high-altitude metropolis of La Paz specifically, once schlepped to work through the mud. Now they commute via Disney-esque aerial cable cars. Brick hovels have been replaced by whimsical mansions. The poorest are reveling in a basic convenience they lacked before massive investment in state infrastructure. Indoor toilets! Oh my gosh. We used to do our business in bags and bring them down to the river, says Vidal Colorado Mamani, a community association president in Huancan, an indigenous neighborhood in southern La Paz. It was humiliating. Now we have the dignity of toilets. Our lives are like nothing they were before. 60+% of Bolivians before Morales came to power lived in poverty. I think 30-40% lived in extreme poverty, and it's all cut in half since his rise. Critics of President Evo Morales, a 59-year-old socialist whose image pops up on t-shirts and left-wing cafes from La Paz to Paris, say Bolivia's first indigenous head of state has co-opted its young democracy, weakened its institutions, and abused his authority to run for another term in office. Again, this was before this coup happened. But 13 years after his movement for socialism won the ballot box, it's indisputable that Bolivians are healthier, wealthier, and better educated, living longer and more equal than at any time in this South American nation's history. So that is a really big admission from this newspaper, the Washington Post, which is not predisposed to making admissions like this. If Morales has at times talked like a militant, it's because if he's behaved like a pragmatist, nationalizing firms such as the communications giant Intel while allowing private competition to keep it on its toes. Bolivia's socialism light has led to distortions and left some private firms crying foul. The country was the poorest in South America when Morales took office in 2006. By most measures, it still is. We still have children dying of malnutrition, said Shirley Franco Rodriguez, a vice president candidate now challenging Morales as socialist. what we are seeing is the Venezuelization of Bolivia. We will have an economic collapse if Morales does not go, which is kind of a weird because what state was the economy in before this? Is kind of a twisted thinking there. Yet under Morales, data shows Bolivia's economy is closing the gap with the rest of the continent, growing faster than most neighbors over the past 13 years. Meanwhile, governments that have embraced market policies, notably in Argentina and Ecuador, face economic and political chaos. And I mean, especially with the relationship with the United States, the relationship with international capital, and the absolute drubbing Latin American countries have received from it, it's no surprise that I think socialism has become kind of been at its strongest in that area because of the way really that most people have been mistreated in such a fashion. So Chile is the South American model for capitalism success, still reigns as the region's richest and most stable economy, yet even as the International Monetary Fund, that champion of the free market, concedes that Bolivia's socialists have been more effective in combating extreme poverty than any other South American government, slashing it from 33% of the population in 2006 to 15% in 2018. So, again, just listen to last week's episode to find out what happened in Chile, or Chile, excuse me. So Morales won re-election in 2009 and 2014. Polls suggest he'll have a harder time now and could lose if the vote gets to a second round. He's running largely on his economic miracle, using prudent fiscal management and state investment to transform the country. He took a very different approach from Venezuela, headed by his close ally Chavez and now by embattled President Nicolas Maduro. And here's how he did it. In Venezuela, the socialist state has seized 10 million acres of private land, expropriated 1,365 companies, and purchased 5,000 more. Bolivia, by contrast, has avoided large-scale land seizures and nationalized just 33 companies, most of which have been state-owned before they were sold off by earlier governments. So that has been the main reason why. Like, he didn't go full bore. Like, that's pretty much the main effective reason why, and it probably kept him out of the purview of some people who are very much against this kind of thing. People like folks in the CIA, people like in our national intelligence department, our military industrial complex, who, let's just say, history shows they do not like to see socialists succeed in any broad sense of the word. That's kind of how they operate here. But what I think is very interesting is this. It was just something about him getting a third term and continuing to run and possibly pushing the boundaries and pushing to get rid of term limits, which he did in a legal way. It's just the fact of the matter, he did it in a legal way. But I think something about that really just caught our government's attention, and we'll get into how they did that now. It started out with Morales seeking a referendum that was narrowly defeated, but then the Supreme Court ended up ruling that term limits were unconstitutional, so he was again permitted to run. And the truth is, like, you can't really get mad at, I mean, you can say, you can get mad at this, but it is illegal. It's not illegal. He is allowed to do it because the Supreme Court said so. That's just how the Bolivian government works. That's how any government works, really. I mean, sure, you can disagree with the idea of him trying to push the boundaries on getting rid of term limits in office. I mean, that is an understandable position to take, but you can't, like, it's not illegal. It just isn't. That's the reality of the situation. So, the election happened on October 20th. To win in this first round, the first round of Bolivian elections here, you need to get at least 50% of the vote or 40% and win by 10 percentage points over the next highest candidate. So this is explained by Kevin Cashman, who is working at the Center, what I think it's called, the Center for Economic and Policy Research. Is what it's about. It's a research that promotes democratic debate on the most important economic and social issues that affect people's lives. So, yeah, that is what you need to know. You can do your research about this. I'm sure it's coming from a left-wing perspective, but from the research that we've been able to do, it seems pretty accurate based on what the situation that we have seen going on here. So he pretty much lays this out. I'm going to go off him for a bit. To understand what the controversy is about, you need to know that there are two counts in the Bolivian system: the TREP, which is the quick count, and the official count. The quick count is so that on election night, at least some results are released. People get a basic idea of what's going on. It takes longer, again, to fully count the votes, similar to like an exit poll here in the U.S., just to give people an idea of what the hell is going on with their election. So the Organization of American States, which observes elections and provides technical guidance, has been recommending these types of systems and implementing them in a variety of countries, including Bolivia. It's been implemented a lot other places around these American states. A quick count is supposed to provide confidence that the election is progressing normally and give the media something to report on. It definitely can get confusing because the official count is the only one that matters. The quick count is just supposed to be kind of a benchmark, if you know what's going on here. So, as the results were coming in, Carlos Mesa Morales, his main opponent, was already saying how he'd progress to the second round. He was saying this based on the quick count, based on incomplete results from the quick count at that. So, when the quick count reached 83.85% of the vote sheets counted, the Electoral Authority held a press conference reporting said results. The result at this point was that Morales was up 45.71%. And Mesa was receiving 37.84, which is a difference of 7.87 percentage points. This would indicate a second round, but remember, this is, again, only 83.85% of the results, and is not the official vote count. At this point, and this is where the controversy started, the electoral authorities stopped the quick count. And this is something that I don't know if they've done this in the past. I don't know really how much the protocol works, but they stopped the quick count for said reasons. The official count had started, and they didn't want to confuse people. They had pledged to release at more than 80%, and they did, and they were investigating how one of their contractors used a server, and they've said this, they kind of laid that out 11 days before the election, how that played out. Eventually, the Electoral Authority was under so much pressure, especially because the media conflated the official and quick counts, that they restarted the quick count. They were going to release a final quick count result, but then got pressured to report results continuously. So people started getting involved. People started kind of getting in their face. So at 95.63% of the vote sheets counted, they reported Morales having a lead of 46.86 to Mesa's 36.72, which was just over the 10 percentage points needed. So all hell broke loose, and they were immediately accused of fraud and helping out Morales. People got pretty mad at that. So, again, this is, I repeat, for the non-official count. This is the TREP count. This is the quick count here, which is the official count, by the way, is the only legal vote count. Anyway, the OAS released a statement where they said that the jump from Morales between these two data points of whatever he was at 85 and whatever he was at 95, from 45 to 46 was not possible. So 10% more of the vote gets in, and it's not possible apparently from Mesa to go from at 83% of the vote. Was in. He was at 45.71, 48.6, 46.86 at 95.63. So that's just not possible, is what they're trying to say. Like, really? I mean, I'm no stats major, but that seems like for someone to go up 1% after more of their counties come in, or not more of their counties, like more of their areas gets reported. Morales is mostly rural support, so generally those ballots do take longer to come in. And for him to go up 1% and Mesa to, let's see where he went up as more of the vote came in. He went from 37.84 to 36.72 because obviously Morales got more share of the vote. So, yeah, that expanded it to quite a degree. And it was apparently, again, it was an inexplicable change in trend that drastically modifies the fate of the election, which was repeated in a later report. This is because Morales' support is largely rural, as I said before. This is, again, from the election results here. And thus reports results later. This quick count trend matches very well with the eventually official count result, which as well, the results from the legislative elections